The Ninja Warriors once again has quickly established itself as one of my favorite games, a familiar premise that's handled remarkably well. It's a title that surprised me, a beat 'em up I can sit down with for a few minutes and have a great time with, and multifaceted in a way that makes returning to it pretty effortless. Instead of an exhaustive critique, hopefully highlighting some of its best qualities and the parts that have stuck with me, will help you find a new favorite too. The premise is suitably straightforward. A dictator has the country under his total control, and the remaining resistance forces deploy robotic assassins in a last-ditch effort to kill Banglar. And then you take control, going right and cutting through everything in your path. Playing through the original, or the first remake, highlights a lot of the changes that pushed once again into being a more expressive experience. The biggest change is to your meter. In both titles, once it's fully charged, you can use it for a screen-clearing bomb or an extra powerful combo ender. But once again goes a bit further, giving each of the characters some additional moves that use the same resource. Stuff like throwing shurikens and unleashing a deadly volley of spikes. The result is something far more dynamic where you're constantly making these minor decisions, of whether or not to hold out a little longer and cash out your full meter, or go for a more considered special attack and delete the enemy in front of you. It's a good addition, complemented by the fact that the meter recharges so experimentation never feels severely punished, as well as by the fact that upon screen transitions your meter is reset. This means there's no point in holding out for some golden opportunity. Why not try out the full range of your arsenal? Smart use of these new powers can see you shredding through bosses and finding new ways to extend your combos. And maybe this all sounds pretty standard, but I've also come to appreciate the way the game supports this by omitting some standard elements of arcade design. There aren't any resources to hoard or complex scoring systems to agonize over, so there's rarely that feeling that you need to reset out of a fear that you've preemptively doomed your run. This is more a matter of personal taste, but I found I lean towards games where near failure encourages you to dig in your heels, instead of restarting over and over to get a perfect run. In a lot of titles, there's a sense that a single failure can start to snowball. Some mistimed attack that drops your combo and loses health, and now I want to have everything in place for the boss, and it's not worth it. Start over. But remove all that, make success a matter of a single health bar, a recharging super meter, and the moves that are innate to your character, and suddenly those nagging feelings melt away. So when you do get hit, lose all your meter and find yourself down to a sliver of health, there's a sense that you can still push through. After all, there's no combo counter you just dropped or items you wasted. Stick with it and you might just make it. Instead of thinking about what the implications of a mistake will be down the line, it's a game where your concerns are always very immediate. Focus on clearing this room, and then worry about the next moment when it comes. These more universal aspects have brought me back, but part of why it's been so easy to put time into the game is seeing how each character has to navigate through each challenge, their unique kit and idiosyncrasies having a dramatic impact on the way the action plays out. So for example, Kunoichi can safely whittle down boss health bars from a distance and moves effortlessly around the screen. Ninja, on the other hand, does incredible amounts of damage and can blitz through a lot of the game, but also has fewer escape options. Position yourself incorrectly and you're in for a world of hurt. Switching characters almost feels like playing a different game. One boss might be a breeze to get past as one character, only to play through as another and have to reconsider all your prior strategies, now recontextualized as a formidable new threat. And speaking of, I think the inclusion of Yaksha and Raiden are brilliant in how bizarre they are, and how much they change how you see the game. These two new characters are a far cry from the original cast, but that's exactly why they suit the game so well. There's nothing quite like wrangling with Raiden's maximalist control scheme to use his various forms, or trying to coherently string together all of Yaksha's unorthodox moves. I hesitate to say that these characters validate the remake, but I do think they set a good precedent. Departures from the usual strong, balanced, fast archetypes that might have been harder to justify if they were meant to be part of a base roster of an original game. If you're going to redo an older game, make so many changes to the look and feel of it, then it's nice to have a bit of fun with it too. These feel like characters that might not exist otherwise. But regardless of who I'm playing as or how well I've done so far, I always find myself on edge for the fight with Jubei. For a character set up as the closest thing to a proper rival, his tactics can feel remarkably cheap. He's fast, can break out of your combos seemingly at random, and what I imagine will annoy players the most, he also summons enemies. Tough enemies, no less. All this makes him a nightmare to contend with only the final boss making me feel as uneasy, but there's an undeniable electricity to this fight as a result. In a way, it almost feels like a truer version of fighting against the design of another player. abiding by the same busted rules you do, with generous iframes and attacks that take precedence over yours, an enemy who capitalizes on his surroundings instead of generously waiting around. Can't deny that some moments in this fight can feel intensely cheap, but that gives the fight a spark I've rarely seen elsewhere, always having to view Jubei as a proper threat, and not just some automated code and animation that you game out a win on. And really, this liveliness is true for most of the enemies in the game. Nowhere near as threatening as Jubei, but you always have to be aware of the one or two moves they could do, instead of being fodder that throws out the same moves every time. It's especially felt in the larger groups, enemies that complement each other well, with overlapping attacks where some will pressure you, others keep distance and pepper you with shots from across the screen, and a few might manage to pull off a devastating grab. And all this without ever feeling too curated. Sometimes it's nice to fight what feels like a hodgepodge of enemy types just to see how they all mesh together. While all of this is going on, you're introduced to a steady supply of new and deadly enemies, giving it a constant momentum that I find other action games sometimes lack. This ties in nicely with the surprisingly well-handled setting that characterizes so much of the game. With the exception of the intro and outro, there are no cutscenes, but there's nonetheless a great sense of narrative progression to these levels. Some stand-up moments for me are descending into the dark heart of Banglar's compound, only to be confronted by the lethal experiments inside. And another level that has you chasing down a figurehead in Banglar's army, facing more and more intense resistance, up until the point that you're avoiding fire from a kill sat. By the end, there's a great feeling of completeness to the whole thing, of having been on a real journey, pitted against the entire roster as you finally close in on your original target. While the mechanics on their own are excellent, it's this care for the world that's really helped the game endure for me. Okay, so all this being said, I've been wrestling with how to talk about the ending itself, and this means spoiling it. Maybe not a big deal for some, but it's a moment that I imagine will be surprisingly divisive for many players. After finally fighting through Banglar's compound and defeating him, the rebel leader who created the robots detonates a bomb inside them, destroying the player character and instilling himself as a new dictator. For something that's otherwise so animated, it's a strangely bleak way of closing out the experience, not the cathartic ending that these types of games normally leave on. And I legitimately don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, I can see it as off-putting for someone who wants to replay the game. Seems kind of pointless to spend time on something where the ending is so dire. On the other, there's something to be said for the impact of it. One of the rare few arcade games in such a downer ending isn't an attempt to pull you back in to play on a different difficulty or whatever, but a moment that's wholly its own. I hope I haven't warded anyone off. For all my talk of its foreboding setting and steep challenge, it's still a very approachable game. So sit down and play it, get stuck in the flow of combat in the larger world, and you're treated to one of the best beat-em-ups on offer. Thanks for watching.